The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. Sam, we have a massive news from Shams Charania that former Phoenix Suns player Keita Bates-Diop is picking up his player option. How do you feel?
I had no idea where you were going with that. When did that drop? Just in the past few minutes?
Before I woke up this morning. It was something that I saw on my phone first thing in the morning, and I thought it was funny.
Okay, I didn't even see it.
We cursed other teams with the player options that the Suns gave out last offseason.
Can I be honest? To this day, even at this time of year, and this is the busiest time of year for these guys, I don't have phone notifications on for either Woj or Shams. Is that crazy?
Yes.
Why is that crazy?
It's crazy.
Though? Why is that? Isn't it crazier? Hold on. Isn't it crazier that you wake up to notifications about Keita Bates-Diop? Because I feel like only 5 or 10% of the tweets these guys are sending out really matter.
It's true.
Most of it is not earth-shattering stuff. I just feel like if it's important, it'll get to me. And I check Twitter and I check Reddit, but I don't need the notifications. That's what I'm saying. I don't need
You do host an NBA podcast, though. That's the only reason I do feel like it's kind of crazy that you don't have the notifications.
It still all gets to me. I don't know. It's just that's what Twitter is for. I guess. Yeah. That's Twitter is for the notifications too. But I could just go to Twitter and I don't know. I'm not going to justify it. Look, it's draft week.
It is.
I'm actually really excited for this episode because we're going to talk about a little bit about the draft for the last time.
Yeah.
We're going to, and I'm more familiar with the class now than I was a month ago. But we're going to talk about some other stuff too. But it's just that smell of potential in the air.
Yeah.
Of these wonderful soon to bloom young men, these college draft prospects that this is maybe the only time we're going to get to celebrate them as Phoenix Suns fans between now and 2031. No, I'm kidding. We will have a few more picks between now and 2031, but I feel like we have to be on our best behavior every time we get to actually participate in a draft now.
Yeah. And having said that, today I feel like I wasn't thinking about the draft that much thanks to a report by a draft guy, Jonathan Gavoni, who wrote about the Phoenix Suns. Let me ask you this first before we even get into it. How many hours today did you spend on the trade machine?
0.
0? You didn't even try?
No, I didn't, as in I didn't get to 1 hour. 20 minutes.
Okay. Fair. Maybe it's easy. And what we're talking about is there's a lot of scuttlebutt about the Phoenix Suns in general, trading down in the draft, maybe looking for options to get more picks, all of that. But buried in an article about the draft, in the section about the Houston Rockets, was that the Houston Rockets were interested in Kevin Durant, who, by all accounts, is not available as far as we know. But I still find it interesting that not only are the Houston Rockets supposedly interested in Kevin Durant, and there's no reason for Gavoni to lie in this case. He's just reporting what he knows.
I think it's important to mention not just Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, by far the best name in the crop of names that Gavoni published, but he said they would be interested in Kevin Durant. Jimmy Butler was in that list, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Mikal Bridges, of course, was there. Everyone's favorite. Above average wing, who Brooklyn's going to ask for many draft picks for, evidently, is committed to keeping. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think the bottom line here, or the headline, is Houston sees themselves as ready to play competitive basketball. And I guess they were already that last season, right? But they see themselves not as just a 500 basketball team that was spending all their cap space on Fred VanVleet and who else do they get? Dylan Brooks.
Yep.
But that now they want to be a playoff team. They want to be like a serious player in the Western Conference, so they want to target someone, including Bridges, including Butler, but the highest possible name perhaps that they could target out of all the names is Kevin Durant.
And of course, this started what is to be expected, a debate about whether or not the Suns should even consider trading Kevin Durant. And that's where I think the conversation is interesting, because we have to talk about all aspects of this. Now, we've done it before, and we've talked about it before, but often when you talk about it, you're just trying to think of, in fact, I think you even asked me, what teams are even interested in Kevin Durant? And I don't think we ever thought the Houston Rockets would be one of those teams. So when we're coming up with fake trades in the past, that's not even one we would have considered. It's just this one that may be trying to push themselves into the upper echelon of the Western Conference to try to compete at the highest level. And that's the type of team that would be interested in Kevin Durant. And I think even beyond that, because I think when you're looking at Kevin Durant in particular, who he is as a player, the type of control that he has over his career, you can't just trade for him. You can't just you can't trade for him and he's surprised by it. He's not going to find out on Twitter. So I think about him as, if they're really interested in him, this is something they would clearly start to do a little bit of tampering, some light tampering, if you will, on the side. Try to reach out to his agent.
It
see
has
if he's
to be
interested.
For it to even get out there. You would think that it would be conceivable that there's mutual interest, right?
They would have to think that, at the very least. You don't have to
Sure.
think that, but they would have to think that.
Well, I mean, KD's got the connection to the state of Texas, obviously, and
Yeah.
I think really it's very conceivable to me that KD would be at least open to moving off the Suns, given how bad their results in the playoffs was last year, and would be open to moving to another team. What is surprising to me is just that, I don't think Houston's ready from a competitive standpoint. I would think any team that thinks they have a shot at KD to even make the Suns an offer on the phone needs to think that by acquiring KD, they're going to win a championship in the next 2 years, because that's basically KD's window.
Right.
I don't really think Houston is that team, so that's where I have some trouble envisioning this report or this conversation going very far. But if they think they're capable of that, they're welcome to make a phone call. They're welcome to make an offer. I would at least listen to an offer. I think Houston is, and I think we're about to talk about this, but a really interesting roster. I mean, they've just got a lot of young pieces.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, too, because Kevin Durant is eligible for an extension. Now, it's only a 1-year extension based on the rules. Just because of his age, you can't extend guys beyond a certain age. So he's eligible for an extension, and it's the type of thing where if the Suns aren't going to sign him to an extension, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't, I think the prudent thing to do is, if you're keeping Kevin Durant, you sign him to that extension. He can still be traded later. Now he's traded with an extra year on his contract, or you can keep him. If things work out this season, you have the opportunity to keep him a little bit longer and maybe compete at the highest level. Say all of a sudden they like their coach and they play a little harder for him. They shoot a little more threes. The defense gets a little better. They find better role players around them, whatever it takes. But if you're not going to do it, or if Kevin Durant says to the Suns, I'm not signing an extension with you guys, I'm not interested in that, I want to have the option to leave later, then you kind of understand the pressure is on for one of these parties to bend or break in this scenario, where you could trade him to Houston and then Houston has the opportunity to extend him at that point. What I find interesting about this conversation, by the way, and I want to go back to Kevin Durant potential interest. You mentioned, he's lived in Texas in the past. There were also rumors that Ime Udoka was going to coach the Brooklyn Nets when KD was on that team, and it was reported at the time that the players were pushing for it. So it's possible that KD is just interested in playing for Ime. It's something that he wants to do, not necessarily for the Houston Rockets, but at the very least, you have some sort of evidence that he was interested in doing it in the past, assuming those reports were accurate or true. So there's some level of connection there. And I do find it interesting, just the fact that the Suns did hire a coach. If KD does not like Bud for any reason, if he's just not interested in playing for Coach Bud, that could be what it is. Because to me,
if he's not being interested in being told to shoot more threes,
if he's worried about standing in the corner in his offense, or he's just not, or he's just more interested in the end of his career playing for a coach that he essentially chooses, then I understand that. There's something to that, I guess, at the very least. Now, this is all assumptions. We have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but I do think that anytime you see a report like this, from our perspective as people who create content, you have to take it somewhat seriously to at least entertain the thoughts about it. And, I think the debate that ignites from a conversation like this is very predictable. And what I find interesting is just how strong the two sides of this debate seem to feel. And I kind of feel like I'm one of those people in the middle where I'm okay keeping Kevin Durant, and I understand the logic of trading him. I'm curious at this point, when you saw this report, what's your reaction? Where do you currently stand? You have to pick one of those two sides, by the way.
No, it's fine.
I'm not trying to force you.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think I'm in the middle too. But I think whenever it's like anything else, like you're just seeing it. It's not like everyone's actually a part of one of these two camps. There are many, many people I think who are in the middle right now who are a little bit disappointed, let's be honest, with how the Kevin Durant experience in Phoenix is going. That doesn't mean they just want to sell him off for pennies on the dollar, right? So I think, you have people who are playing sides and picking teams, so to speak, and those are always going to be the loudest voices online, but it doesn't actually mean that they're in the majority. I think you have to listen to offers on KD only because he's got a lot more trade value right now than he does, say, 2 years from now, or even 1 year from now, potentially. And if you don't particularly believe in the notion that whatever the Suns will be able to do this summer, outside of just like bringing in Bud as a new coach, will be enough for them to win a championship in the next one season or 2 seasons, then that's why you begin to entertain potential, trade offers. Yeah. I don't think it's like what I'll completely reject is the notion of rebuilding, right? You don't trade KD to rebuild. But you could trade KD, assuming you still have a happy Devin Booker and Bradley Beal on the roster. You could trade KD if you can convince yourself that by doing so, you're maximizing your chance to win a championship in, say, the next 4, 5, 6 years versus just the next 2, right? It's just a matter of maybe aligning Booker and Beal and other players on the roster with guys who are on a little bit of a better timeline. There's the magic word. And, I think that it would take a very particular package to get that done. But, I would at least listen to stuff.
And I just think the side that understands I understand the side that wants to keep Kevin Durant. The idea of that's pretty clear. Kevin Durant is one of the better players in the NBA, one of the best scorers in the NBA currently, even last season. He also played a lot for the Suns last season. And you could make the case that everything went wrong last season, and if you did it better, if everything worked out in a better situation and the way the playoffs broke in the Suns' favor, then they have the opportunity to compete for an NBA championship because they have 2 players that could potentially in any season be vaulted into the top 10 of the NBA in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Pretty obvious, right? That's a pretty good sales pitch, I think. But the other side of that is they traded everything for Kevin Durant, everything that they could trade for Kevin Durant. And they got swept. I feel like I have to remind people all the time. They got swept.
Yeah.
They didn't win a single game
and it
in
gets
the playoffs.
Worse. It gets worse in the sense that they got swept in a season where KD was really fucking healthy.
Yes.
So
not only
that's
that,
where it starts to get scary when we actually
and I think
think
it's even worse than that. I think it's even worse than that. They never looked great the entire season. The best stretch of the season is where they played the last 10 games all together, all the big 3. They were 7-3, and in the 3 losses, they lost by a combined 46 points. It was still embarrassing in those 3 losses, and the 7 wins that they had were against good teams, missing good players, a lot of those teams. And of course, it all worked out to where they made the playoffs. They were able to be out of the play-in. They barely escaped the play-in. And they got wrecked, just completely wrecked. And the idea of you traded everything, you can't even win a playoff game. And now you're rebuilding from the point where you can't win a single playoff game and you can't sign anyone beyond a minimum contract. You can't combine players in a trade in order to improve. So you can't aggregate salaries and get a better player than a minimum contract player. And the one player you did like that you signed or traded for in the last season, Grayson Allen, is now your best trade asset. In order to improve, you have to trade him. So you're in this situation where it's really difficult, close to impossible, to improve dramatically in a single offseason. And we're talking about a team that didn't win a single game. Now, if they made the second round, right, and they won 2 games in the second round, and you're trying to talk yourself into making minor improvements and maybe they can make the Western Conference Finals, fair. But if you're someone that looks at a team that got completely swept, didn't win a game, and kind of was never close in those 4 games, and you're trying to say they could improve enough to compete for an NBA championship, I understand people who think that's really hard to see and hard to believe. Now, you could trade Kevin Durant, and then maybe you don't win a playoff game as well, right? Maybe you completely get swept again, or you don't even make the playoffs or you're in the play-in. But if you have assets to get better, if you have young players who could improve to make your team better, I understand wanting that. And it's just, I just understand both sides of this argument in many ways.
Yeah, you're talking about players who might get better versus right now we have to worry about the Suns. Like, what if every player just comes back worse next year? Because we don't have any young talent. And, there's a real privilege in being afforded if you did trade KD. And we should talk about Houston specifically in a second because we should talk about their roster. But if you have guys who are under team control for 5 or 6 or 7 years and you do believe in their ability to get better, that's hard to turn your nose up at completely.
Because Anthony Edwards is not getting worse next season. Jaden McDaniels is not getting worse next season.
Right.
Chet Holmgren, SGA, they're not getting worse next season. Yeah, you can look at the Warriors and say they're going down. You can look at the Lakers and you can say they're going down because they're older. But the Suns are currently in that group. They're not outside of that group. So they don't have young players too. They're with the Warriors. They're with the Lakers. They just barely won enough games to be outside of that play-in race that those teams were in.
So the Houston Rockets, I'm going to turn our attention towards them now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
They were a 500 basketball team last year. Graduated from, years of...
They're spooky now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't really think... It's funny because I don't really think about them as spooky in my mind, maybe. But... I think bringing in Van Vliet and Brooks obviously helped them a lot. To a certain extent, they just needed actual adults in the locker room, and that was predictable. But if you're going to make a KD trade with the Houston Rockets, this is an interesting roster because they have 4 rock-solid, awesome young players, varying degrees of awesome, and we can distinguish them from each other. But they've got 4 kind of awesome prospects who are 21 or younger. And those 4 are Alperen Şengün, Jalen Green, Amon Thompson, and Jabari Smith Jr. 4 guys that they've drafted in the past 4 years. I think to even begin to entertain a KD trade, you're talking about getting 2 of these guys, right? 2 of those 4 have to be Phoenix Suns before we even talk about all the picks.
I mean, I like that idea, but I think if the one is Şengün, I kind of feel like I could still entertain the idea of that. Do you know what I mean?
Şengün's by far the best right now. It's funny. I can't remember if we were doing it on a main feed episode or a playback or whatever, but we recently had a conversation where you and I were debating. We were like, who's the best player on the Rockets? It's Şengün, right? And, he comes with all the other baggage of being a center who has to protect the paint and has kind of small arms and all that stuff, but he's a 21-year-old center who just averaged 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists per game.
Yeah.
And he's a rare breed in the NBA. Basically, the only other centers like him are Nikola Jokic, who's obviously way better than him, but then Sabonis. It's those 2, and then it's Şengün. And they're the only 3 guys who really play like that. And being able to run your offense through a center as a true hub like that is very much a privilege, and is also why I will say I think he would be by far the most difficult of these 4 names to get, because I think if I'm just speaking for Houston here, if I'm Houston and I'm talking myself into Kevin Durant coming to my team and making us a championship contender, I'm envisioning Kevin Durant playing next to Şengün, because Şengün is such a talented playmaker, and KD can make up for some of Şengün's defensive deficiencies with his weak side rim protection, all that stuff.
I agree with you, but I will say if they did trade, okay, here I'll throw out a trade that I put together, and I'll see what you think. And I'm curious how many first round picks would have to be included in this for you to like.
Yeah, absolutely. I love picks.
Dylan Brooks. Because basically what's hard with the Houston Rockets, they have no cap space. They used it all last year on Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. So you basically have to start any trade with Dylan Brooks, if you just assume that they want to keep Fred VanVleet, which I do think they would, right? Because they just kind of need a point guard. It's hard to find a point guard.
They want to compete, right? This is what's difficult about it. Like, they want to compete. So they can't be left with no good players.
Dylan Brooks, who was good last year, he was one of the better perimeter defenders last year. Annoying, don't get me wrong. I'm not excited about it, but I do think he was good at basketball last year. Dylan Brooks, Şengün, Steven Adams, who I have an idea for what to do with him in a second, and Tari Eason, who was like a second round pick for them, right? And just kind of, you could see why a team would be interested in Eason if you could get him.
Yeah, it's actually a good shout. Tari Eason's has had a couple of really solid seasons.
He's a young player who could be potentially improving over time, and I think would be a good fit on a team that needs role players like the Suns. I think if you can get Steven Adams, and if he's playable, like if he looks healthy, if you can reroute him, you can keep him too. But if you can reroute him to OKC, who needs a big man, and obviously they love Steven Adams from his past, and maybe could be somebody that they just take into their cap space. So for the Suns, you're saving an extra $12 million in salary by just rerouting him to OKC and giving him to OKC for nothing, essentially, because you don't need him. Or you keep him and try to trade Nurkic if he's playable and good. But I think a team like OKC might be more willing to give him more time to be good. Whereas also you have Şengün in this case.
We have Şengün now, right? So Şengün's now playing like 35 minutes a game for the Suns at center. Like he's their new franchise center.
Yeah, exactly. So you obviously you'd have to figure out what to do with Nurkic. How many firsts? Because this is a scenario, I think, where if you get Şengün, I would be willing to do it for whatever the minimum amount of firsts necessary to get this done is, which, of course, in their view, would be zero.
If Houston's giving up Şengün and Brooks and Eason, they're probably not going to be interested in giving you more than a first or two.
Maybe one. I think I would do this for one. That's the thing. And maybe that's dumb.
Fair. I think that's fair if you feel that way. But I think it's harder because they really view Şengün as that guy.
Yeah.
So my opinion, I would do that, maybe, for the record. Yeah. But I think the reason also that we have to mention this would be really hard to get done is I'm just not sure this would ever be able to get done without a third team being involved.
Because the Adams is an example of the third team. You could do it in two separate transactions, don't get me wrong. But
that's fair.
But they have no cap space. They're completely capped out. They can take more. Right, they can take up to 125% of their contract. So you don't have to match KD's salary. You just have to get within like 75% of it.
The way I envision it for Houston is, again, they want to compete. They want to have KD. They don't want to trade you Fred VanVleet because they want to continue to be good. But he's their biggest contract. They also, honestly, may not even want to trade Dylan Brooks, who's making $20-something million, because they envision him as a playoff contributor. I don't know.
Right. Just not a lot of big salaries beyond that. You'd have to cobble together 5 players, basically.
But that's where the third team comes in. So when I think about how maybe a trade like this gets done,
Maddie, tell him.
Yes, Maddie, tell him. But let me just try and pitch you for a second. So let's say they're not going to give us Şengün, but you can pick 2 out of Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, and Amen Thompson. You can pick 2 out of those 3. And then we're going to involve a third team, and that third team is going to be the one that sends the red. They're going to send like a $20 or $25 million role player, maybe a starting caliber player, to the Suns in order to make the contracts work. And Houston's going to send a pick to that team in order to get that done.
The 4th overall pick or whatever they have, or just any future.
Not that good of a pick.
Could be a future Brooklyn.
Here's
pick.
one idea that I thought of, and this is just again, I did not spend much time on Trade Machine. I was just kind of thinking of like a basic idea. You target a team that's in the apron that doesn't want to be in the apron. This is where you take advantage of the fact that the apron rules are really restrictive. A team like the Portland Trailblazers right now has absolutely no business being a first apron team, and yet they are. Mm-hmm. So maybe they don't want to pay that additional tax penalty, right? But they've got good players on their roster who are making $25 million. They've got Jeremy Grant on that roster.
Yeah.
They've got Malcolm Brogdon on that roster. If you could get like Jabari Smith and Amen Thompson from the Rockets, and then Portland sending you a Jeremy Grant or a Malcolm Brogdon to make the salaries work, and then a couple picks are going to them from Houston, and maybe another pick or 2 is going to you from Houston. How would you feel about something like that?
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good.
You're getting.
I feel like you could probably sell Devin Booker on that.
You're getting a guy who can. You're getting like a really high quality maybe starter role player who can help you right now, whether it's Brogdon or Grant. I know they just signed Grant to that extension, so maybe he'd be a little harder, but you would ask for him, I think. But even if it's Brogdon, like that's a high quality player who's in the prime of his career. But Jabari Smith and Amen Thompson are two guys who like are contributing statistically to the Rockets right now. They're not all-stars right now, but both of them are 21 years old. You'd have both of them under team control for the next 5 or 6 years if you want them.
Right.
And both of them have all-star, I repeat, like all-star potential. Now, do they have Kevin Durant potential? No. But like, again, I think if an offer like this, like either the one I'm talking about or the one you're talking about is on the table for the Suns, you have to at least listen.
Yeah, you do. And of course you'd have to talk to Devin Booker about it because that's the reality of it. Or the other thing is, if Kevin Durant wants to go, you just do it. You just do it. Now's your chance, basically, to maximize his value. And, you know, if he wants to go, it sucks. Things didn't work out. You have an out, take the out. You don't just dig in and say, nope, we traded everything. We got to give it, you know, that's a sunk cost fallacy. You're just digging the hole even deeper, you know, because if he wants out, you're only going to make it worse. You got to find a way to capitalize. Personally, if it were me, I'd start with Şengün and say build a trade around him and figure it out from there. Because you're trying to find the best fit. Neither of us said Jalen Green, right? And it's for obvious reasons.
He's my least favorite, but you know, he's my least favorite probably as a player in terms of what I think his value is, but also just Bradley Beal and Booker. But
yes,
like, think
that's
about
exactly right. I like him. It's just that building a team around 3 shooting guards. No,
yeah,
no
exactly.
Thanks. Yeah.
But like, think about this: if the trade that I
Grayson.
just proposed, if the trade that I just proposed went down, I know we're Suns fans, right? So we shouldn't care whether or not it works for Houston. But like, if you're Houston, you now have a starting 5. You didn't trade Van Vliet. You didn't trade Brooks. You didn't trade Şengün. You now have a starting 5 of Van Vliet, Jalen Green at the 2, Brooks at the 3, KD at the 4, Şengün at the 5. If you can't compete for a championship with that, like that should be everything you guys want right there. And all we're asking for is Amen Thompson, who is like a generational defensive prospect, and Jabari Smith, who shoots threes at a high level now after this last season. As a big man, and maybe Jeremy Grant, who's not an all-star caliber player, but he's a really good player. Something like that. It feels like the backbone of a trade to me.
And that's why I feel like the Şengün one that I came up with is fine too, in that they would have Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Kevin Durant on their team. You know, this team has enough assets, and it's kind of in a place where the Suns were in the past. They have enough assets that worked out. They drafted well enough that you can come up with multiple options that you feel like maybe they'd be willing to do. And to me, it's just, you know, if you can get Şengün, now's your chance. It's just, imagine how difficult it would be to trap Devin Booker if he's slipping the ball to Şengün on the other side of that. Someone who can pass and score instead of just pass outside of that position. It's just a nice thing to picture, you know, a good fit with somebody like Devin Booker. Not sure if Devin Booker would like it. And ultimately, that does matter. Because if your entire team is falling apart because you're trading Kevin Durant, that would suck. That would not be great to completely lose out on somebody that you have all this equity in with years and years and years of him being great to the team and great to the city and building multiple winners around him. You have to find a way, if you're going to trade him, to do it the right way. And if you don't, if he's fully bought in, if KD's fully bought in next year, if he wants to play the way that best suits the team and everyone's on the same page, I'm still happy. Like, this isn't a scenario where I'm just saying trade him. But I don't think there is no value in the people that do think that he should be traded. I think both sides have good points. And it's just about how it works out. You're rolling the dice either way. And it's just about which side you want to bet on if you're playing craps here, right? Because that's kind of how I feel like the Suns are in the scenario that they put themselves in.
Yeah.
They did it to themselves. Like, this is Matt Ishbia, right?
Matt Ishbia specifically did it to himself. He, above anyone else, is the one who did this to himself.
I do find it interesting that, by the way, I should mention that if you were trading Kevin Durant, you might look around in the NBA, if you're Matt Ishbia, and say, I need somebody that will help me completely maximize a Kevin Durant trade. And they did hire the guy in Matt Tellem who fleeced Matt Ishbia for Kevin Durant in the first place. Yeah, and now they have a guy who does have in his history traded Kevin Durant for a lot of assets. That's all I'm saying. It's
Matt
just I
Tellem
find it a
making
little
an entire career out of trading Kevin Durant.
Yeah, the Rockets will hire him next. Yeah. Quickly, and then I want to get to draft stuff in a second, but I do want to say another thing in that Gavoni piece about the Suns, with which I guess we could talk about trading back in the draft when we get to the draft section, because he talked about that too, was that the Suns could be potentially interested in Chris Dunn. Now, Chris Dunn is somebody that we've talked about in the past, and I do think at this point, Gambo, as the Reaper, kind of did say that he's going to stay in Utah.
Yeah,
They're
he said
to give him money.
A few weeks ago, apparently, Gambo reapered this on the radio and said that, Chris Dunn wants to stay in Utah. But this is a case where I'm more than happy to consider multiple reports.
You just want it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, just to say, I just want to get it out there on the record that if Chris Dunn is open, we've talked about other point guards in the past. I think we'll do another free agency episode. Hopefully sometime in the next week. We're going to have to find time to do all this stuff. But I know we've talked about Campaign in the past, bringing him back as a natural target. I remember I tried to sell you on Kyle Lowry as a target, a veteran. Chris Dunn is not a veteran. Well, actually, he's 29 years old, so he is a veteran.
But he's 7 years in the NBA, I think.
Yeah, but he's not a veteran in the same way. He hasn't really played.
Right.
Let me even see.
Not a lot of playoff minutes. Yeah,
five career playoff games for Chris Dunn in not quite a decade in the league, but like 7 years now. So he's a different type of veteran, but he's very much a guy who, for the past 2 years in Utah, not a lot of people were watching, but low key, he's been kicking ass. Like, he's been playing really well, and I know a lot of people in Utah. I'm actually buddies with a big Jazz fan who loves Chris Dunn, and this year he had to start over 30 games, and in those 30 games when Chris Dunn was starting, again, the Jazz were not a playoff team, but they were playing 500 basketball, when Chris Dunn, the backup point guard, had to suddenly be starting because he plays awesome defense. He's shooting the three better than he ever has before in his career, not on high volume, but he can at least make the open ones. And he can run an offense, right? Like this, he's not just like a Jordan Goodwin who is long and athletic, but can't run an offense at the point guard position. Chris Dunn can run an offense, so there's a lot to like here, just as a veteran minimum candidate for the Suns.
It makes a ton of sense, and overall, I do think I believe the idea that the Suns are interested, regardless of whether or not they're capable of landing Chris Dunn, and I almost feel like it's interesting to think about the type of player that they're looking for just as a prospect, because Chris Dunn we think of him as a defensive point guard, right? He is a guy who's out there to play defense. So if you're thinking about the Suns signing a point guard, a lot of people are thinking they need to sign a guy who can run the offense. And I do kind of agree with that. It would be nice to have another guy who could dribble besides the guys that are the big three, because just getting the ball down the court, getting the ball into their hands, and then starting the play from there, having another guy who could potentially do that would be great. But Chris Dunn, he can do that. But when you think about what he can do mostly, he's the guy that you would want chasing around guys, around screens. And look, if you want to not make Grayson Allen do that constantly, if you want to not make Devin Booker or Bradley Beal do that constantly, this would be a guy who can help pick up that slack. And I think he would be really great at that. And if the Suns are interested in defensive point guards, maybe we can come up with a list of other guys that they could be interested in. But, Chris Dunn would make a lot of sense. It's unfortunate. I think that the Suns have no ability of signing anyone beyond minimum contracts, because if he's going to accept a minimum contract, maybe the Suns could get him because they got minutes for him and he'd be playing on potentially a good team with a good coach. But the Jazz have the ability to sign him for more, and if he's not going to accept a minimum contract, then they're just going to offer him more money, and the Suns are just going to be out of that race.
I think what's in it for Dunn is if he actually believes in the Suns' ability to make a deep playoff run, he has to see the entire vision, right? Like, he could go back to Utah for a little bit more money than the Suns could offer him, or he could go to the Suns and he plays a 15, 20-minute per game role as the backup point guard, and the Suns make a deep playoff run. And then a year from now, we lose him and he's making $10 million, right? That's the vision that the Suns would kind of need to sell him on, is that by coming to a good playoff team like Phoenix, Dunn is really investing in himself. and that the team would be fine with losing him in a year because that's just how the game works. But yeah, just throwing some numbers out there. Over the last 2 seasons combined with Utah, I've got his per 36 numbers here. So keep in mind they are per 36, but 13 points. He's not really a scorer.
No.
5.5 rebounds. Good rebounding for his position. 7.5 assists, only 2.3 turnovers. Really good ratio. 1.8 steals. Great guy at playing the passing lanes. And close to a block per 36 minutes as a point guard. He's also, he's 6'3". He's got a 6'9" wingspan. Obviously, these are reasons why Chris Dunn, way back when, was drafted in the top 10 in the first place. He's just got great natural size for his position. He's not like a tiny point guard. He's got a built frame and has a lot behind him. So, this would be definitely one of my favorite guys that they could target, whether they get him or not.
I agree. And I could see them. I absolutely believe that they're interested, regardless of if they can get him. So, maybe there's a chance he's just sold in the vision. Does he have any? I don't think he's ever been around Bud at any point of his career, right? No, because he's only played
with Bud,
Minnesota, Chicago, Atlanta for a while.
Portland, and then
Portland and Utah. Man, he's played on a lot of teams in his short career. So none of those interacted or intersected.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually forget that he was drafted by Minnesota because I think of him mostly as a Chicago Bull. That's where he played the most time.
Right.
In their long line of starting point guards who didn't quite work out. Although, we were saying that about Kobe White, and then Kobe White finally turned it around this year. So maybe things are looking up for Chicago too. But yeah, that's all I got on Chris Dunn. You got anything else before we head to draft talk? Okay.
The NBA draft is 2 days this year, Wednesday, June 26th, and Thursday, June 27th. I will say right now, first of all, we're planning on being on playback for the entirety of the first round, watching there. So hang out with us. You won't be able to see the stream, but we can all talk through it. Look, we all get the picks at the same time anyway. It's whenever Sham Sharani or Adrian Wojnarowski tweets them out anyway. So we're all going to get them at the same time. So hang out there. Be with Suns fans. Be with us. Hear our thoughts first. We're not draft guys, so you're not going to get these extremely well-informed takes, but you will get initial first reactions, and you can tell us what you think as it happens. So hang out there. If the Suns end up trading multiple picks into the second round, I will do my best at the very least to try to be available during the second round on playback as well. And then, of course, after the draft, we'll get some sort of podcast out. If they take a player on Wednesday, we might have to record Wednesday night, Sam. And if they take a player on Thursday, too, we might have to do 2. But we'll definitely get something out covering that. But you did some extra work here to look at the draft. The Suns have had guys in. They've had guys in to work out. So we know some names at the very least that they may or may not be interested in. And, I want you to tell me about them because I haven't had enough time. Haven't had enough time. Put your draft guy hat on, and I'll put my not draft guy hat on.
I don't want to oversell.
Ethicalhoops.com, yeah.
Ethicalhoops.com, yeah. There's the plug. I don't want to oversell the amount of research that I've done here, but I am starting to gain familiarity with more of the draft class. I think at this point I know more than you, Mike.
You're cramming. I haven't crammed. You're cramming. I have not crammed.
A little bit. So here's where I want to start. First of all, the fact that not everyone who comes and works out for a team is made public, especially when it comes to the Suns. So it's entirely possible that a lot of guys we just don't know about have actually worked out for the Suns in the past couple weeks. Yeah. There's only a few names that we really know here, but I want to thank ArizonaSports.com for putting together a little list of some of the higher caliber names who it has been publicly confirmed have worked out for Phoenix. And what I think is interesting here, Mike, is that they actually looked at, on this Arizona Sports article, they took the players' names, and then alongside it, they took their, I think it was the ESPN big board ranking for each guy. There are only there are only 5 prospects in around the top 40 that have publicly worked out for the Suns. Again, there might be more that we don't know about.
It's the worst kept secret that the Suns are looking to trade back. Everyone's talking about it. They clearly are. Just based on the guys they're working out alone.
There's a couple possibilities. Either and I'll give the names in a second. I think, anyone who's been following along with Gambo, I know he's talking about this every day on the radio. Like, a lot of people already know these names, but for anyone who hasn't, there's a couple possibilities, though. Either the Suns are really thinking about trading back, which is kind of what I think they should do. The possibility that I'm curious if you've thought about it all, and which scares me a little bit, is that James Jones is just going to do his James Jones thing, and it doesn't matter.
The guy that's in the 40s at 22, yeah,
it's right. Based on the limited,
no, that's definitely possible.
Based on the limited
sample size, they don't care what
size.
your draft board says. Yeah,
exactly.
They don't care.
We've only really experienced 2 James Jones drafts. And both times, it was like, he was just like, fuck it, I'm taking a guy 20 picks early because that's what I'm going to do. He is one of the GMs with the most conviction in the league, and the rest of us just have to deal with it. And so, there is a little bit. We just have to
Google who the hell the person is the day of the draft. Exactly.
You're like, that is not one of the 10 or 15 names that I was expecting at all.
Yeah.
And so the names here, the guys who have publicly worked out for the Suns that we know about, Tyler Kolek, we've already talked about. In depth on this podcast. I encourage you guys to go back. If you haven't listened to that one, when was that? Was that a week ago? 2 weeks ago?
A week or two, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's either a week or 2 weeks ago that we talked about Tyler Kolek in depth. I think a week. He is 25th on ESPN's big board. The other guys, Ryan Dunn. There's been a lot of talk about Ryan Dunn in the past 48 hours for the Suns. He is 28th. Jalen Tyson is 31st. Tyler Smith is 34th. And A.J. Mitchell is 41st. And, of course, they've worked out a lot of other guys, including guys who have been made available publicly. Bronny James being one example of those guys who they've worked out twice. But no, those are the only 5 guys who are in the top 40.
Okay.
So, do you want to know more about these players, Mike? Do you care? Are you just going to look them up?
I am interested. No, I am interested. This is the time of year where it becomes interesting to me because now they're NBA players, so I got to learn.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's also the possibility that you just want to look up their names on draft night, but now even
I'm
going
to have to do that. Retaining this information is different than learning it. I'm going to try my best right now. We'll see how much I remember that day.
Even if the Suns don't take these guys, there will be more names now that as we're following along on playback. Let's start with Ryan Dunn, since he's first on the list, 28th.
Okay, I do know a little bit about him.
How about this? Best defender in the class.
Yes. Is he also the worst offensive player, though?
Maybe, yes.
Yeah. Like zero possibility of shooting, including free throws, right?
I was trying to sell you on the positive first before.
I'm sorry, it's one
negative.
of the only people I know anything about here.
So Ryan Dunn is a sophomore out of Virginia. He is 6'8", with I believe either a 7 foot, maybe even a 7'1" wingspan. He averaged 8 points, 7 rebounds per game for Virginia, and yes, he is. There's no kind way to say it. A tragic offensive prospect. At this point in his development, he shot 20% from deep in his sophomore season on 7 of 35 shooting overall, and he shot 53% from the free throw line. Oftentimes we look at college prospects and we say, well, maybe you're not shooting the 3-ball well right now, but you're giving us 65, 70, even 75% free throw shooting. We think that there's room for improvement there.
While you were talking, looked up Matisse Thybulle's free throw percentage in college, 78% career.
Yeah.
So this is an example of how bad that is.
You could still try and talk yourself in to improvement here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so a couple names come to mind. Like if you look at the Ringers big board, for instance, KOC's big board, and these are not, I don't think this is just KOC. I've seen these names brought up a lot with regard to Ryan Dunn. First, I should really sell the defense a little bit. Per 40 minutes, which is how the college basketball reference page does it instead of per 36. I'm not exactly sure why, but they've got 1.9 steals, 3.3 blocks per 40 minutes for a 6'8" wing.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
We're talking about a guy who is like entirely capable of kind of switching on it and onto any position. He can guard the ball. He can guard off the ball. He'll, play the passing lanes. He'll be a tremendous weak side rim protector. I think the big thing, though, is that maybe given his size, and this is what really makes me think that the Suns might be looking into him and taking him seriously as a prospect. With his size at 6'8" and 7'1", I haven't watched enough tape to know if, I don't think he played any center for Virginia. But I think this is a pick that they're making. If you make this pick in the first round, you're not thinking that this is going to be my small forward, power forward, or like maybe that'll be his primary position. But you're thinking what's going to keep this guy on the floor on an NBA court is even if he can't shoot, even if he's a Josh Okogie type tragic offensive player, that he'll be able to give you stints as a small ball 5 just because of his sheer size, and that's going to keep him on the floor and keep him valuable. That's my guess.
So we're talking about tall Josh Okogie then, basically, right?
That's as far as I can surmise the guess for why I think the Suns would be interested. It's possible that they're not thinking that at all. It's possible that they're just looking at him as a 3-4, like your typical forward tweener. But
I mean, if you can get a big who can shoot threes next to somebody like that and they become the screener in the offense, then maybe you can get a little bit more out of him. You have to be a great cutter, which I haven't watched enough film or any really to know if he's capable of that, but you have to be a great cutter to be effective. He's big enough that I imagine he's a pretty good finisher at the rim. I mean, he's got the size and the body for it, so
yeah, I mean, I think
I'm not sure if that's a skill of his. But
I don't have the stats on that. I think he's okay, yeah.
If you want a player like that to be an effective NBA player, they have to be, first of all, capable of passing if they become a screener, because otherwise they're going to leave somebody like that wide open at the three-point line, wide open in the middle of the floor, and then just cover the rim, right, and try to stop them at the rim. So you have to be capable of passing in that scenario. He hasn't done a lot of passing. Doesn't mean he can't do it. You can learn some short roll stuff in the NBA. It's possible. And you have to be a great offensive rebounder / defensive rebounder.
Yeah,
which he has some capability of doing, but maybe it's not great, right?
10 rebounds per 40. I didn't mention
that's pretty good for college. That's pretty good.
No, that's really good for a 6'8" guy. That's really good, and so that's just one more piece that I think is maybe lending the Suns to think like we could draft this guy, we could play him at the 3 or 4, and nobody's going to guard him. But what's really going to keep him on the floor is if he can play the 5 for us sometimes.
Could I talk myself into a player of that archetype? Yes, probably. Yeah, I could find myself going, hey, that's not bad. Best defender in the draft. That's something that people will say if he's picked, right? That's just the mantra that we would hold on to if he does get picked. All right, I appreciate you. You sold me a little bit. You've found a way to get me to talk myself into him on draft night at the very least if the Suns pick him. If a team other than the Suns pick him, I'll be like, that guy will never be able to shoot. He can't play in the NBA.
Now you have something to hold against him. Yeah. Right. The last thing I want to say here, though, like there are a couple of very obvious pro comps when you look at a player like this, like going back to KOC's big board, right? Andre Roberson, the classic example of the guy who's just an awesome defender, couldn't quite stick around in the NBA probably as long as he wanted to, partially because of that knee injury, but also partially just because he never figured out how to shoot. And maybe the upside version of it is Herb Jones for the New Orleans Pelicans, who is an example of guy who, when he was drafted, or at least going into his senior year of college, was still struggling to shoot the basketball. But then his senior year of college, he showed some promise. I think, his 3-point percentage got up there to like 35% on low volume. And all of a sudden he gets to the NBA. Now he's really good. Like he's a good shooter who can stay on the floor. And that really allows him to be like an impactful guy who you can trust in the playoffs. But what both of those guys have in common is that because of their lack of offensive polish coming into the league, they were drafted, I think, like late first round / second round. Right. So Dunn, to me, is a prospect where if the Suns took him at 22 because they just really are in love with him and he's their guy, I have a feeling there are going to be other guys on the board at that point where I'll be kind of disappointed in that pick. Just because there's the complete bust potential of like, what if this guy just can never do anything on offense? If they make a trade like Gambo is kind of proposing right now, with Utah for 29 and 32, or if they're calling up Minnesota about 27 and 37, or New York about 25 and 38, right? Like there are a bunch of teams in the general 25 to 40 range that have a couple of picks that maybe the Suns could get in on some action. Like then, if you're using one of those picks on Ryan Dunn and thinking he's going to be an awesome defender and an awesome player if he ever puts it together.
Put him in the G League for a few years and see if he develops some offense, right?
And just like if he doesn't ever put it together, you use the other pick on like a safe shooter who like you just know is going to give you something, right? Like and it just makes you feel a little bit better. I think about that sort of proposition, that value proposition.
It does not in any way feel like a James Jones pick. But that doesn't mean that we
still don't know. I mean, we know James Jones, and yet we don't. We base everything we know about James Jones on 2 drafts.
He likes people who can shoot, and he likes people who usually have a pretty good assist to turnover ratio, right? Those seem to be pretty good indicators of a player that he would like. Who else you got?
Next guy we're going to talk about is Jalen Tyson. He is a third-year guard forward. It says guard here on College Basketball Reference, but he's 6'7". He's another forward type. Transferred a couple of times, once from Texas to Texas Tech, then transferred after his sophomore year from Texas Tech to California. We're seeing this a lot more now, obviously, just players transferring all over the place. And had an interesting season, man, in the sense that, again, I didn't watch these games at the time, right? Like this is all just research I've been doing in the past couple weeks. California was not good this year. They were 13-19. And Jalen Tyson was the primary scorer and creator on that team. He averaged 20 points, 7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, over a steal a game for them. The reason I think you find him, in addition to the fact that he's a little bit of an older prospect, I think 22, the reason that you find him in end of first round, early second round ranges in big boards and mock drafts is sort of related to that, right? It's like, this is a guy who maybe didn't succeed in college as a primary creator. Like, he wasn't good enough, even at the college level, and his stats were pretty good, but he couldn't take his team anywhere as a primary creator. But he has enough that he flashed, particularly his season before at Texas Tech. He has enough role player skills that I think teams are hoping he can sort of fall back on, right? Just to make him a dependable role player. And this is where it's interesting, because I've seen certain people go back and forth on this. Sam Vecini in particular is one guy I've mentioned his name a couple times now on this pod this month. But he's a guy whose opinions I just really trust when it comes to the draft. And he seems to think that Jalen Tyson is not being given enough credit for his ability to maybe even have a higher upside as an older prospect than some other people are saying. So there's a lot of back and forth between what certain people are saying about him. But he's got good size, 6'7" plus wingspan. He's not known for being a shooter, but he can shoot the three just well enough that he should be able to survive in the NBA. He shot 36% on 4.5 attempts per game this last season in California. He's got good.
I'm looking at his stats. A massive increase in total 3-pointers taken over. He only played a few games in the first season. Only shot 4. 107 in the next, 139 in the next season. So he's just increasing his amounts.
He was just increasing his volume every year.
And it's interesting to think, if he was in Texas Tech, if he was more of a role player on that team where he became a star player on Cal, the percentage difference is 40 to 36 on a lower attempts when he shot 40 in the previous season. But you're drafting him thinking of him more as a role player, of course. So maybe the percentage could actually be higher than that.
Well,
36.
and he also, he also shot 80% this most recent season from the free throw line on 4.6 attempts per game. So this is another thing. He demonstrated decent rim pressure, getting to the free throw line. He's strong for his size. When I was listening to Vecini talk about him, what impressed him particularly was his deceleration as he gets to the basket, and was also praising his handles for a guy of his size. So, that's just one person's opinion. I am most certainly not an expert, but there seem to be some people in the Jalen Tyson camp who believe that he is truly just a role player who probably doesn't excel at anything at the NBA level. And then there are other people in another camp who kind of think that, hey, if you take a swing on this guy, maybe he's not going to be the best shooter, but if you believe in his frame and his ability to drive to the basket, decelerate a little bit before he gets to the cup, and you believe in his handles, you're looking not at a primary creator, but you're looking at a guy who could be like a high-level role player who attacks closeouts, and that maybe there's a better upside there. So, I think I could talk myself for sure into Jalen Tyson. This is another example. Jalen Tyson at 22, I think, doesn't appeal to me. Jalen Tyson at 29 or 32, I think you could be speaking my language for sure.
Okay. I'm looking at the Ringer draft guide. It says shades of Jared Dudley.
Yeah.
So I just had to throw that out there. Yeah.
Yeah. KOC, and I think Ryan Gomes is the other one.
Ryan Gomes is the other one. Yeah, which is a hilarious comp.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like Jared Dudley. That's not a name. Jared Dudley had a great NBA career, but that implies safe to me. That doesn't imply like a little bit of a bigger wing.
Right.
who can play. I mean, Dudley was a bigger wing because he had like baby fat, but like not like a guy who can play a little bit of bully ball. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think the way that Vicini was talking about him, at least, like maybe Jalen Tyson could play a little bit of bully ball. Maybe not going to work as much at the NBA level as it does at
218 is what
college.
he's listed at here. So yeah,
right.
It's
218 is that's a big wing. That's a
pretty
guy
big.
who can maybe
Yeah,
play up
6'5".
play up to the 4.
Yeah.
And the other thing I neglected to mention, defense. I think we're talking about like a fine defender. Like the reason he's not in the first round, like safely in the first round, is that he didn't demonstrate that he was like a great defender. He just sort of demonstrated that he has the size to be a good defender if he chooses to, right? But like I think he's mostly an average defender as far as college prospects go, but not going to like let you down.
Right.
That's another guy. Tyler Smith, coming out of the G League Ignite, is a guy that we have to talk about. He is, where did it say? ESPN said he was 34th. Do you have any opinions on the G League Ignite as a program before we get into this one?
It's going away after this year, isn't it? Or maybe after next year?
I think it is, yeah.
I think it was a good idea. Maybe it not working is what it is, but I think it was a good idea. I think the fact that college players can now make money, and maybe it helped with that, probably eliminated the need for it entirely, but I thought it was a good idea when it was conceived.
I thought it was a good idea too, especially we were talking about, I think I remember actually us, having this conversation on the podcast when it was announced, because it was only a few years ago. But like the notion of giving players that alternate pathway that they didn't have to choose the NCAA before they could get, paid and stuff, giving them that alternate pathway where they could get a little bit of money was really appealing. The problem now, though, after we've seen it in a couple of years, is that it's really hard to evaluate players in G League Ignite when even the G League Ignite team itself doesn't seem to have much interest in being competitive, right? Like any college program. Right. Do you want to know what the G League Ignite's record was this year? And for those who don't know, the G League Ignite, what they do is they take a bunch of like 17, 18-year-old prospects who are interested in not playing in college, and they pay them a salary, and they say, okay, we're going to have you play against all the other teams in the G League and give you like a season as if it was a college season, and we can
NBA
have scouts.
Players. You're playing against NBA players, basically.
You're playing against NBA players. You're playing against the minor leagues.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And we're going to have scouts evaluate you, and we're going to have a coaching staff for you, and it'll be
and
like
it's NBA rules. You're shooting at the
sure.
NBA 3-point line, so there are, when you're looking at the stats, those have to all be factored in.
Right, but it's like we're giving you structure, but it's all in-house. Like the NBA doesn't have to rely on anyone else. And usually the way it's worked is that there'll be like, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 guys on the roster who sign up who are actually like prospects. And then they fill out the rest of the roster with more like fringe NBA guys, like random.
Yeah.
If you look at the G League Ignite roster this past year, it was like John Jenkins or Jeremy Pargo or like random guys who you may recognize.
They have to be good enough to play in the G League,
ago.
But not good enough that an NBA team would have them on a two-way.
Exactly.
So they're usually not, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The idea is that you're just trying to get other guys in the locker room to give them a little bit of structure.
Right.
All that being said, there's not a lot of structure
yeah,
to what.
True.
So like the idea is that the G League Ignite is going to have this structure, but then you've got all these college teams on one side that are really competing for something, right? Like they're trying to make the tournament. They're trying to play for the legacy of their respective college programs. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, you've got G League Ignite. G League Ignite this year went 2-32 in their season.
Yikes!
They I don't know how, if they fly them around or bus them around or what they do, but they just went around from city to city, second tier city to second tier city around the U.S. and got their ass kicked by a bunch of 26-year-old grown men, and that's just what they did for their entire season. And now these poor guys, these few prospects, like Ron Holland being the biggest one, but Tyler Smith being another one, have to be evaluated based on that play. And it's just kind of hard to evaluate them coming out of that sort of organization, right? Because it's like, their structure just wasn't as good.
There's no real investment.
Yeah. Right. There's no real investment. Like even just like watching the games and like, from a set perspective, it feels like they don't necessarily have a coherent identity of who any of the players are trying to be. So you've got all these guys and it's like, well, yeah, you're trying to figure out what they could be. They could theoretically be anything, but you really haven't given them that requisite structure. So all of that being said, all of that context provided for why it's difficult to evaluate these guys. Tyler Smith Played on the G League Ignite this year. He's another guy that the Suns are reportedly looking at. And he is your classic, and maybe this is going to scare you, Mike, your 4-5 tweener. How do you feel about four? Well, I mean, really, he played power forward, but is being scouted as a potential 4-5.
It's interesting. I have PTSD. Is he going to finish his rookie contract?
I have
with
no
the Phoenix
idea.
Suns would be the question.
I have no idea.
They just did this with a player who has the same last name. Are they related?
They're not. I don't think they're related.
Jalen Smith and Tyler Smith?
No, I don't think they're related.
Cousins?
There are a lot of Smiths in the U.S.
Are they comparable as players?
Well, that's where it's interesting because, this is what's hard. So, there are a lot of tweeners every year that get drafted in the NBA. There's nothing conventionally necessarily wrong with being a tweener. It's more so just recognizing, if you're a 2-3 tweener in the NBA, not a lot of differences between those two positions. If you're a 3-4 tweener these days, where you just want every position to switch and shoot threes, not a lot of differences between a small forward and a power forward in the NBA in 2024. If you're a 4-5 tweener, though, this is where it gets hard because if I'm drafting you to be a 5, I need you to do big man stuff. I need you to protect the rim.
Yeah.
I need you to rebound the ball. I need you
Yep.
to show me that you can finish at the rim.
Yep.
Dunks, alley-oops, whatever. Whereas if you're a 4, now suddenly I'm asking you to guard the perimeter, right? And so this is why there's a very small intersection of prospects who can do that. And in particular, Mike, I feel like the intersection of prospects who can do that, legitimately play both the 4 and the 5, there's a reason that they get drafted these days. They're lottery prospects. They're the Victor Wembanyama's and the Alex Sars of the world, right? Who tend to be these freakish athletes who are going to get drafted in the top 10 because there's a certain recognition that skill set is so rare. So if you're talking about a guy like Tyler Smith here, he's 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. He shot 35% from 3 in the G League, again, which is the NBA 3. So for his age, that's good. But can he actually play both of these positions? Not really. Otherwise, we would be talking about him as a top 10 pick and not a guy who might be taken 35th. So he could shoot threes. He grabbed 8 rebounds, 1.2 blocks per 36. I don't really see him as a center personally, but also if you look at the scouting report, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who believe that no one's calling defense his calling card for this guy.
Right.
So this is a difficult one. I think this would probably be one of the bigger swings available, just because again we have to contextualize it with the G League Ignite kind of situation.
Yeah.
Maybe he would just look better if he had more
you
structure.
made the take easy because now I can say, is he a diamond in the rough? Right?
Sure. If you want to believe that, that's
Was
fine.
he being hidden by this terrible organization? Yeah. No, it's interesting because it's really, I imagine for scouts, it'd be really hard to figure out if there's no hierarchy built into the team, if all these players are essentially playing for their life on a team that won't even exist at the end of the year with no incentive to win anything because there's nothing to win at the end. How do you scout these guys? It's a fascinating thing. It's probably good that it's going away. But yeah, I mean, as a player who's tall and can shoot, that's good. Don't get me wrong. And that is something that, from what we know, that James Jones seems to like. So I could see something like this. And where did you say he's currently being expected to go in the draft?
He's 34th on that big board. Just to keep it consistent,
Okay.
I think it'll be funny if we just continue to throw out the KOC.
Okay, I'm
pro
hearing
comps.
now.
It's
27th on theirs, by the way.
It's Charlie Villanueva is his pro comp from KOC.
How? I don't know. I guess picturing Charlie in today's league is kind of hard for me to do, but that doesn't sound like Charlie Villanueva to me.
Charlie might play the 5 in today's league.
Yeah,
you know?
I guess he would, but does he shoot? This is his whole thing is shooting, right? That it says right here, spacer. That's the only little badge they gave him.
Yeah, well, KOC says here, non-factor on defense who often looks lost. There are times when he freezes while defending pick and rolls, not even moving his feet or reacting to the ball. Aside from lacking strength, he also lacks a degree of toughness when it comes to battling on the interior. So on the one hand, all entirely valid. I believe that. On the other hand, again,
Bud
imagine
can fix him.
Well, but again, imagine your team is 1-27 on the season. for the 28th game in a row, you find yourself down 20 points in the second quarter. How hard are you going to defend that pick and roll? You know, it's like to a certain extent, he should be motivated. Yeah. He should be motivated by wanting to be an NBA player. Right. Yeah. So like, I totally believe if he's not showing the requisite toughness, there probably is something to that. But also just, you know, to say one more time, to cut him a little bit of slack and say, I don't know how you evaluate G League Ignite players. It's really hard.
Yeah. 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 That's it is kind of funny to think just to the extent that Brook Lopez has completely remade his career into something that it never was. Because there's probably a lot of people watching the NBA now, maybe people listening to this podcast that don't know that Brook Lopez at the time before those Bucks teams when he was on the Brooklyn Nets was a offensive player that just really played out of the post and was considered a really bad defensive player for like the majority of the beginning of his career. Then he went to Milwaukee, became a 3-point shooter, and then became one of the best drop defender bigs in the NBA. So, you know, when I talk about Bud fixing a guy, there is some level of precedent in there, but a lot of that credit goes to Brook Lopez, who just completely changed the kind of player that he is and extended his career by years and years and years because of that. But it is kind of fascinating to think about that now.
One of the most remarkable like mid-career renaissances we've seen in a player in NBA history, honestly. We're going to be talking about Brook Lopez, and ironically, honestly, or unironically, we're going to be talking about how Brook Lopez changed the league for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they won a championship. So
yeah, and
he was a part of it, a big part of it, in fact. He played great defense against the Suns in that series. Is there any other guys that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I will, but just to put a ribbon on Tyler Smith here, I just want to say, if people couldn't tell from the tone of our conversation, I think this would be a horrible pick at 22, and you know, just to be flat out. And I think you know, this is one that you only justify if you've traded for like 27 and 37, and you want to take him with one of those. Okay, fine. But I don't see him as being worthy of the 22nd pick. He's probably my least favorite prospect of the ones mentioned in this list.
Got it.
Yeah.
I like it.
So yeah, I mean,
we have something to be mad at if they take him. So there you go.
Sure. Yeah. No. There you go. There are a couple other guys I want to talk about, not because I know that they've worked out for the Suns. I don't know, but just as I've done more research, I feel like I actually know enough now to like have takes, which is exciting because now like I have like a couple of players who I can point at on draft night and be like, I like that guy. Like that team, I think made a good move, or if the Suns take him, made a good move. One of the guys, I think, can you remind me, did Damon talk to us about Bub Carrington a few weeks ago when he came on the pod? Yeah, yes. I've watched more Bub Carrington now, and I've also watched Bub Carrington talk to Sam Vecini and break down his own film, similar to how Tyler Kolek did that. Mm-hmm. I saw one of the betting models gave the Suns a 10% chance of drafting Bub Carrington based on their odds. And I posted on Twitter that I would be ecstatic if that actually happens. I think he's a really intriguing prospect. I don't think there's a chance in hell that it actually happens because I just don't think he's the type of player they're looking for.
Right.
But if you remember Bub Carrington, at least, the way Damon sold him to us and everything, he's one of the best pull-up shooters in the draft. Mm-hmm. Of all of the draft prospects, he averaged the most pull-up points per game. I think over 8 pull-up points per game this year. He was also a freshman. So, for me, I'm not going to pretend that I watch college basketball enough to have like a scouting style. I don't. But I think, one thing that I'm always afraid of, and you can like either agree or disagree, but like if you give me no statistical production whatsoever, like I don't care if you're an 18 or 19-year-old prospect. These guys who get drafted in the top 10 based on averaging like 5 points per game scare me. There's a certain like risk level of
Ben. Is it because of drug and bender?
Is
that why?
No, I sincerely believe, Mike, that a lot of it you could trace directly back to the drug and bender pick.
Yeah.
Yes. But like
But Derek Lively.
I know. So sometimes it works, but also Derek Lively's a different type of player. Derek Lively was drafted to be a run and dunk big. And Dragan Bender was drafted to be Victor Wembanyama.
Skilled. Yeah.
And he certainly wasn't. Yeah. So yeah, there's a certain level of that like if you're a freshman and you're just giving me nothing from a stats perspective, I'm kind of I'm kind of not interested in you. But on the other hand, I recognize that with the older prospects like Tyler Kolek, who we've talked about at length, you can be old and you can really dominate the college game at a certain point and give really good stats. A guy like Tyler Kolek led the NCAA in assists. But you're still going to have these pressing athletic and size issues that are going to continue to haunt you, even at the NBA. And some guys will be able to overcome that. But if you can draft a guy who's a bit of a compromise, who's giving you some athleticism and some size and also some statistical production, a lot of times that really does feel like the best way to go. And Bub Carrington is just he's a perfect example of that. He's 6'4", 6'5" with shoes, I think, with like a 6'8" wingspan, but he played point guard this year, and he's an awesome pull-up shooter already. He averaged 4.1 assists to 1.9 turnovers, so he's already giving you a solid feel for the floor and being a playmaker, even as a point guard. I think there's a lot to like there. He shot like over 50% on all of his pull-up twos as a freshman. And the last thing that the Suns need of literally any skill right now is a guy who shoots more pull-up twos.
Yeah, right.
However, the guys who can make pull-up twos at that efficient of a rate as 19-year-old prospects, those guys
is high.
Those guys tend to have really high ceilings, especially if they're 6'4", 6'5", and not like 6'1", 6'2". Like there was someone in I forget who, I apologize, but someone replied to me on Twitter the other day saying, "Oh, they don't like Bub Carrington because they see him as another Bones Highland." Bones Highland, and that's fine if you feel that way, but Bones Highland is 6'2", 170 pounds, and Bub Carrington is 6'4", 190 pounds, right? Yeah, so there's just a difference, I think, in terms of size, in terms of his ability that, you can talk yourself into. He's still growing into his body, and he's going to be able to guard multiple positions. So yeah, that's one guy where I just saw a 10% chance that the Suns take him. If he's still on the board at 22, I would be really tempted to take a guy like that, even though I'm not entirely sure he fits the Suns for what they need right now. Because that just feels like that could be like a nice little home run swing, who's maybe even not that much of a home run swing. Like maybe he could be pretty good even if he's not great.
And you'll eat a shoe if they draft him.
And I'll eat a shoe. I said that I will eat a shoe if they draft him, because I really don't believe they will. Last guy I want to talk about, also another one of, I wouldn't call him my guy exactly, but I'll just say Kellen Olson, I want to throw him a bone, and Kevin Zimmerman over at Empire the Suns. They've been putting out good work, and they put out a good podcast last week just talking about some of their favorite prospects for the Suns. And Kellen has been talking to us privately, Mike, about Terrence Shannon for a little while. Terrence Shannon Jr. And I think that's another example of a guy who he may have successfully talked me into if he's available at 22 for the Suns. Terrence Shannon Jr. Was obviously just, there was a lot about him because he was just cleared in this rape case. But it's very much a case of you have to investigate and do your own research on that before when you're interviewing a guy like that's something you have to take very seriously. But he's supposedly a first-round prospect. Statistically, all I'll say about him is fifth-year prospect, averaged 23 points per game for Illinois this year. Crazy rim pressure, almost 9 free throw attempts per game at 80%. Shot threes well, 36%. Very athletic. I think big enough to survive at the next level as a wing who's like 6'6", like 210 pounds, something like that. I don't think this is a guy who you would draft to be a primary creator, but I think if you're talking about a guy who could be maybe a future secondary, tertiary creator who's just really, really, really good at straight line drives, and attacking closeouts and that sort of thing, there's a lot of potential there. And he's like 23 years old, so he can probably come in and contribute right now. But he also has some potential, I think.
Yeah, he's almost 24, it looks like.
Yeah.
Shades of Tyreek Evans.
Yep.
It says on the Ringers draft guide. You gave me a lot of fascinating players to think about, and I appreciate you doing some work because I clearly didn't to prepare for this podcast. And I'm interested in all those guys. It does seem like, look, the pool of players to pick that are shorter is just larger than the pool of players to pick that are taller, but there was a lot of guys that were like under 6'6" there that you listed, right? It seems like most of those guys.
Yeah, so Bub Carrington is guard, right? Obviously. Terrence Shannon is like a forward, but yeah, like a 6'6". Yeah. But I think probably the only reason that's happened is because we've just so happened to have talked about a bunch of bigs already. So we talked about Duran.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We talked about
it's also
Duran
who they
Holmes.
worked out. So the Suns might be interested.
That's true.
And even Bronny James is what, like 6'2".
And even Bronny James is tiny. But we talked about Duran Holmes on the podcast. Definitely, we'd like him, right? We talked about Yves Misi last week on the Patreon podcast.
Who's interesting? Yeah.
He's definitely interesting as like a rim protecting, dunking
7-foot
big,
defender who can't
for
really
sure.
shoot. Yeah.
Yep. We talked extensively about Tyler Kolek. I'm trying to think of like where the other holes are. We never really got into a big conversation about Khalil Ware, who I know a lot of Suns fans are into.
We
never
touched on Edey at one point.
We talked about Zach Edey at one point. We never really talked about Tristan Da Silva, at least extensively.
Because he's probably going to be gone. It seems like I do like Tristan Da Silva in the research that I've done, but it seems like he's probably going to be gone by 22nd.
He's another do it all wing. I mean, that's truly a guy who you take if you want like a do it all wing. He's 23 years old. So,
that's the Cam Johnson pick, basically.
This is a Cam Johnson pick, yeah.
But
at this point, like, I think we're starting to get a feel for the Suns' range, right? And there are
had to guess,
many more interesting
prediction.
prospects in the second round, but we haven't covered all those guys. Yes.
If you had to make a prediction on what the Suns are going to do, what do you think it's going to be? They could trade Nurkic, by the way.
I know.
That's something they could attach the pick to Nurkic and trade him. Throwing it out there.
They could trade KD too. We just spent 30 minutes talking
about that. It's true. They could trade KD.
This has been a long podcast.
If they want that 4th overall pick, they could trade KD. I think the most likely scenario, they trade back, get 2 picks. They pick. I'm going to even say the players: Tyler Kolek and Bronny James.
Tyler Kolek and Bronny James. They take 2 guards like that.
That's just my prediction. Seems like something that Matt Ishbia might do.
Man.
You got any prediction? You think they're going to keep 22? You think they're going to trade?
No,
the noise for trading back is so loud at this point.
I would love.
Maybe that doesn't matter because
I honestly think I prefer it. To be real with you, like
I think it's not a draft that you need the high picks because they're all kind of flat,
and we just need young talent.
If you look at 10
bad.
different mock drafts, they're all going to be different. They're not, like there are players that'll be 35th on one draft that'll be 12th on the other, and like that kind of thing is happening in mock drafts this year.
Yeah, we need young talent so bad, dude. Like if they could trade, I wonder what New York wants to do because I know everyone's talking about 29-32, but that 25-38 pairing that New York has is pretty attractive too.
Right.
Like if you just have a guy who, you're not really into at 22, but then you trade back a couple picks. Again, I'm looking at KOC's big board here, and Misi is here at 25th. Like you could get someone like that at 25 who you probably don't have to reach for at 22, and then if you go back to 38, like one of your other guys might be available. Like
maybe Tyler Kolek is.
I mean, that probably not, but maybe. But like even Ryan Dunn is here at 36. Cam Spencer, great shooters, here at 37. Tyler Smith might be there at the Jalen Tyson might be there. I don't know. It's like I think I would trade back if I had the choice.
I'm very excited to watch. I'm excited to watch with you. I'll join us on Playback. That's open to everyone, by the way. You'll just be talking at it's like a Spaces on Twitter, but a different location for that, and a chat that's private to us and Suns fans. Join us, playback.tv/thetimeline for sure for the first round, possibly for the second round. Very much looking forward to that. Thank you, Sam, for doing all that work. Also, if you'd like to join our Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. Look, these next few weeks in NBA coverage, it's going to get crazy. Not the worst time to join if you want to join us for extra coverage and extra podcasts every week for only $6 a month. You can also join our Discord at only $3 a month. We appreciate you all, and we'll be back very, very soon.